All right, we will go ahead and begin our November 28th Board of Education meeting. I hope everybody had a wonderful holiday. And Tammy, please let the record show that all board members are present this evening. And I'll turn it over to Mr. Stephen Hall for our Pledge of Allegiance.
Good evening, board members. Tonight we welcome two students from Bowerman Elementary School who will our Pledge of Allegiance, Penelope Hutchison and Giovanni Choate. Would you please come forward? Penelope and Giovanni. So I'm going to read a little bit about both Penelope and Giovanni. This information was provided by their principal. Penelope is a first grader who is an eager learner and a great teammate to her Bowerman Star family. She always enters the building with a smile, ready to shine. This quarter, she is also celebrating a great achievement. She has raised her first quarter attendance to 99% this school year, which is up from 91% last year. Giovanni is a star leader at Bowerman. He is a true example of what perseverance and hard work look like. Giovanni puts all his efforts into his work and brings love and kindness into his school, according to his principal. If you are here tonight to support Penelope and Giovanni, please stand so that we may honor you as well.
Say the pledge.
And now we invite all of you who are able to stand to join us in the Pledge of Allegiance. And Penelope and Giovanni, when you're ready, please lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
We pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Great job. I'm going to stay up here. We're going to get a picture. Okay, here we are. And we're going to come right over here.
No rhythm.
CD skipping. Awesome. Well done. Thank you so much. Thank you.
She's going with you.
Oh, honey, you can have
it. All right, I'm going to hold this seat because she's ready to be the next superintendent. I love it.
We will continue tonight with our Honoring Excellence, and we'll be honoring our Glendale High School Counseling Team. To start our recognition tonight, we invite them forward. Glendale High School Counseling Team, please come on up. So we have counselors Jamie Jo Temple, Emma Sherrill, Christy Ditzfeld, and Justin Paragon. Recently received the highest award that a Missouri school counseling program can earn, being designated as the Dr. Norman C. Geisber's nationally recognized Missouri program. This award is for individual schools whose program has a positive impact on student success and the school community. I would also like to invite Dr. Allison Roffers, our Director of Counseling Services, to come forward, and Dr. Roffers will introduce additional special guests this evening. Congratulations again, Glendale Counseling Team.
Thank you so much for having us. Thank you. They put in a lot of hard work, and so much hard work that we have 3 representatives from the Department of Education at the state level to come down and recognize them. They drove all the way from Jeff City just for this tonight, so I would like to recognize them for being here. We have Sierra Griffin, if you want to stand and just wave. She's the assistant director. She's the Assistant Director of School Counseling at DESE. And then we have Pat Runge, who is the Director of School Counseling at DESE. And then I am going to call Chrissy Bayshore to the podium to give a few words to the Glendale team. Chrissy is the coordinator of school counseling and wellness at DESE. So thanks for being here.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. Good evening. The Dr. Norm C. Geisber's nationally recognized Missouri program is the national recognition award that Missouri school counseling programs may earn. Achieving this award not only garners state recognition, but also national recognition as a RAMP award through the American School Counselor Association. As mentioned, the award is for individual schools whose school counseling programs have received a level of implementation that emphasizes the positive impact of the school counseling program on student success and the school community. A school counseling program that earns this award will serve as a model for programs across the state that emphasize the impact of comprehensive school counseling programs on systemic change within their schools, use data to create positive change that benefits schools and students, consistently work toward continuous program improvement, and embrace the collaboration of all stakeholders within the school community to build a program based upon student needs and outcome. It is our absolute honor to be here to recognize this team tonight. They will formally be honored in Jefferson City in March, and then also at the national ceremony in the summer. So we understand how the amazing amount and tremendous amount of work that went into this program. It takes a lot of dedication, it takes a lot of commitment, and of course it takes a lot of leadership buy-in, and that collaboration is what makes this work. There's not a whole lot of schools in the state that have this recognition, so you should be very, very proud of yourselves. And we are very proud. Thank you.
Congratulations again. We'd like to get a photo with Dr. Lathan and Ms. Kincaid, please. And Dr. Roffers and Dr. Groves, would you come forward? Yes, please. Desi, would you please come forward? Can you get it, Teresa? Thank you all and congratulations. Tonight, we are honored to recognize the final group of SPS employees who are celebrating service anniversary milestones this school year. Joining us this evening are several employees celebrating 25 years and 30 years of service to our students. The first two employees recognized tonight have served SPS for 30 years. Lori Fisher and Danny Lorbach, would you please come forward? Lori is an assistant principal at Hickory Hills K-8 school, and Danny is a teacher at McBride Elementary School, both with 30 years of service to SPS. Don't shy away from center stage. Our next honorees have been employed by SPS for 25 years. Please come forward as I call your name. Cynthia Billier, Shauna Clearwater, Robin Davidson, Heather Huckstep, Melissa Netzer, Troy Kukta, Jason Steingraber and Jennifer Steingraber. So I think what we'll do is take a group photo, and then we're going to individually have you step forward for a photo with Dr. Lathan and Ms. Kincaid. "25 years, 25 years of service." And we'll start with our individual photos and presentations. Cynthia Billier is a teacher at Disney Elementary School. Cynthia Billier at Disney, 25 years of service. Next, we have Shauna Clearwater, a teacher at Disney Elementary School. Got this one for Robin. Next, we have our SPS Teacher of the Year, Robin Davidson. Robin Davidson is a teacher at Gray Elementary School. Congratulations. Heather Huckstep is a teacher with Launch Virtual Learning. "25 years of service. Congratulations. Melissa Netzer is a principal at Mallory Early Childhood Center. Congratulations. Troy Cookta is a teacher at Fremont Elementary School. 25 years of service with SPS. Next up is Jason Steingraber, an Executive Director of Choice Programs and Summer Learning. Absolutely. And by request, joining is Jennifer Steingraber, a speech language pathologist.
She was in my I'm glad you enjoyed your day. Now, you want me to get you something to drink?
So Jason is an Executive Director of Choice Programs and Summer Learning, and Jennifer is a speech language pathologist at Mallory Early Childhood Center, both with 25 years with SPS. Congratulations to you both. Thank you. Once again, we thank all of our dedicated employees of Springfield Public Schools and congratulate these with distinguished years of service. And we will conclude honoring excellence this evening with our most valuable player recognition in celebration of our SPS United theme. We're always pleased to honor our most valuable player for the month. And this recognition reminds us that teamwork and a collective vision can positively impact SPS students and staff. Tonight's MVP helps ensure that teachers at Disney Elementary School have the support and resources they need to provide students a positive learning experience. Her work to collaborate with others to provide outstanding service directly supports the district's strategic plan. Let's watch this video to learn more about this month's MVP, Michelle Sleminski.
My name is Michelle Sleminski, and I'm a district instructional coach supporting Disney Elementary and the RISE program. So an instructional coach, it's essentially meant to be a support person that I work directly with teachers and then indirectly with students.
Her ability to go into classrooms, lead professional learning teams, just her knowledge and her focus on how she can take curriculum and break it down is phenomenal.
One of my primary roles is really being a thinking partner for teachers. So when they're saying, okay, we know this is the learning we want for our students, but we feel like they're struggling, we take a look together and kind of dig in and figure out where are those stuck points and what can we do to support the students.
She's taken them through a journey on their curriculum and helped them realize the learning that they need to take back in to impact student learning.
If our goal is building a success-ready student, right, what are those pieces that they need to absolutely have in place to make sure that we can say, you know what, this student has successfully mastered what they needed to know and do in 3rd grade, and they are ready for 4th grade and beyond.
The teachers have really grown into the process of professional learning communities through Michelle's leadership. She really looks and takes that deep dive, picks those big rocks up, and she breaks them down into those pebbles so that we can see a true picture on how we best can serve our students.
I'm not here to be the expert. I'm just here to maybe shoulder a little bit of the burden. I'm gonna roll my sleeves up and get into classrooms and do the work right alongside you. I'm constantly saying to teachers, like, let's look for progress over perfection. And as long as you're doing something right and we're thinking about making sure that our decisions are supporting our students, then we're on the right track.
Michelle, would you please come forward, please? Dr. Elliott, please come forward.
Sure, thank you.
We've also invited Dr. Elliott, the principal at Disney, to share a few words about Michelle's impact.
Well, while she's getting her picture taken, I really want to take that MVP and take it to a different level or a different process of thinking. We talk about modeling and molding valuable players, and so when Michelle shows up to work every day, that is her goal, is to mold some valuable players that are going to make a huge impact in the classroom. And I know at the beginning of the year, Dr. Lathan talked about customer service, and there is not a component where Michelle says, well, that's not my job. Instead, she says, what can I do in this area? How can I serve in this arena, in this position? So she never says no. She's a go-getter. She's creative. She's brilliant, and we are very lucky to have her. Thank you, Miss Dr. Majors. And we are so thankful that she's with Disney. So nice job.
Just super quickly, I will just say thank you so much for this recognition. Truly, I feel like all of our teachers, our staff at our sites, from our kitchen staff to our bus drivers to our custodial staff, our teachers, our leaders. I am blessed to work with 2 of the very best leaders and have worked for several in this room that have shaped me as an educator. And so I truly just appreciate this recognition, but want you to know that every teacher, every person in this room should be recognized. So thank you.
Congratulations again to Michelle, and that concludes Honoring Excellence for this evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephen. Lots of celebrations tonight. It's always fun to start with that. We will move on to item 2.04, approval of the agenda. The recommended action is that the board approve the agenda as presented. Do I have a motion? Motion from Board Member Thomas Tate. Do I have a second? Second. Second from Board Member Kreis. This time we will vote. Motion carries 7-0. Moving on to item 3.01, our public comments. We've now come to the portion of our meeting where we hear from our public speakers. The Board of Education welcomes comments about the issues being discussed. The board uses this time in our meeting to listen to the public, but will not comment or engage with the public during this meeting. The board allows for up to 10 speakers per public comment period. The board chair will call on individuals in the order in which they signed up. Substitutions are not permitted. Each speaker will be limited to 3 minutes and will be timed by the board secretary. Comments must be acceptable for a business and family-friendly environment. Inappropriate language, gestures, or personal attacks will not be tolerated. It's inappropriate to address the board about individual students or individual staff members by name in open meeting. If you have concerns about individuals, these concerns should be addressed through the appropriate administrative supervisors, either in the school or the district office. If you have materials you'd like to share, please place them on the tray in the podium, and they'll be distributed to the board members after the meeting. This evening, we have one public speaker, Laura Mullins.
Hello. All right, I come to you this evening on behalf of the 3,000 staff represented by SNEA, staff that is broken, discouraged, and frustrated by ineffective and unsafe practices put in place by SPS administration. While teachers continue to be monitored, micromanaged, call it whatever makes you feel justified, down to the minute in their classrooms over learning standards and assessment timelines, who is managing our students? PBIS, conscious discipline, and other trauma-informed practices being implemented were never developed with the intention to lower expectations of students, nor were they meant to replace consequences. Yet this is exactly what SPS seems to have done. Because this district started requiring staff to essentially ignore infractions they deemed as minor, we now have previously referable offenses occurring without any discipline. Here are some examples of incidents that have gone without consequences in our district just in the weeks before Thanksgiving. Bullying with repeated threats of physical harm despite a history of violent assaults, threatening to shoot other students, flipping chairs, writing on walls, and upending offices and classrooms, getting in teachers' faces, putting fingers in their faces and yelling at them, telling a teacher to sit on their male appendage. Because this is supposed to be a family-friendly environment, I substituted the offensive word, even though these are the words SPS is allowing students to use in our learning environments. When a student's behavior rises to the point where a referral is finally allowed, in many cases they are not getting processed or staff are not told to write them at all, particularly when it comes to repeat offenders and or students with an IEP or 504. Can violent behaviors be the result of a disability? Yes. Does that exclude them from the disciplinary process? Absolutely not. In these cases in which we know a student has violent tendencies, is the district providing them with an alternate placement or even an individual behavior technician? No. Instead, these students remain in the classroom, creating a volatile environment for everyone involved. SPS has even started ordering some staff protective vests and arm shields. Is this really the best answer? How much learning is taking place when the students have to evacuate for their safety, in some cases multiple times a day? What example is this setting for our children? Everyone seems to be a fan of research-based ideas, so I'll refer to Maslow's hierarchy of need. Without meeting student safety needs, students are not capable of learning. Safety has to be first and foremost, or students will quit coming to school and staff will leave, as we continue to see them do. The safety of our students and staff cannot be subordinate to other goals like making our numbers look good. In your strategic plan, you have committed to providing classroom environments conducive to teaching and learning. This is not occurring. Instead, you are creating new victims of trauma in children and adults alike. SPS needs to return to following the code of conduct, even for minor infractions. Consistent progressive discipline is not the bad guy, it's the solution. Thank you.
Thank you, Laura. That concludes our public comment portion of our meeting. Moving on to item 4.01, approval of minutes and consent agenda. The recommended action is that the board approve consent agenda items 4.01 through 6.01. Do I have a motion?
I make motion.
Motion from Board Member McCoskey. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second from Board Member Thomas Tate. At this time, we will vote. Tammy, did it pass?
Yes.
Yes,
Sorry.
7-0. That's okay, that's okay. Motion carries 7-0. Moving on to item 7.01, the annual financial audit. We're welcoming Dr. Shaw to present this item.
Good evening. It is my pleasure to introduce Mr. Brian Eckhoff, partner with Westbrook and Company, and he will come present the 2022-23 financial audit.
Good evening. I'm Brian Eckhoff with Westbrook and Company. We're going to do a brief overview of the financial statements. We just recently completed the audit. If you have questions as I'm going through it, don't hesitate to stop me and we can kind of address them. So you'll see on the screen the first page in your audit is the independent auditor's report, and you'll see that the red box is presented fairly. So this is a clean audit opinion or a good audit report. So exactly what you want to see in your audited financial statements. This is the balance sheet as of June 30th. You can see that the district had $359 million in funds as of June 30th, split between the four funds. General fund being about $100 million. Special revenue fund, standard practice in school districts is to take that to a zero balance. Debt service fund had about $25 million, and then your capital projects fund had $233 million due to the bond proceeds that were issued this year. Down at the bottom of the page, you can see the various fund balances. And those are described in page 28 on the footnotes. So in your general fund, you have $1.9 million worth of launch program funds that are restricted strictly for that launch program. In your food service, DESI requires you to track your food service balance and spend it on future food service expenditures. That number is $2.6 million. Your student activities are $9.4. That's clubs and organizations. And then the remaining fund balance in your general fund is always shown as unassigned, and that is $86 million. Debt service funds are always restricted. That's by your outside bonding agents. That's the $25 million. And then your capital projects fund, we have about $200 million worth of unspent bond proceeds that are restricted. And then committed balance of about $16 million. That is projects that the board had approved prior to June 30th but had not been paid. Those are outside the bond. And then the remaining fund balance in the capital projects fund of $17.6 million is always shown as assigned. That is the remaining balance in that fund. This is a statement of revenues and expenditures and changes in fund balance. You can see that the total current year revenues were $428 million. Total current year expenditures were $475 million. For a change in fund balance from revenues over expenditures, it was actually a decrease of $46 million. However, if you look at the bond proceeds of $190 million, it's showing a net change in fund balance of $143 million. So overall, if you look at the general fund, we had an increase of $16 million in the general fund this year. The big increase was in your capital projects fund, which is due to these bonds that were issued during the year. And then in the debt service fund, you can see the decrease of $39 million. That is due to the high amount of principal that was paid down during the year. This is a summary of your debt. We started the year with $369 million. With the bond issue this year, along with the payoffs, you ended the year with $492 million. There are 6 currently outstanding bonds. Also, you have direct borrowings for various technologies. Those will be paid off in 2025. This is a 5-year comparison of your revenues. You can see the COVID dollars coming in on the federal chart where we've been increased the last 4 years in a row. Your federal revenues have gone from $29 million 4 years ago to $67 million this year. So just be aware that going forward, those COVID dollars are running out and we will not have those COVID dollars. So federal revenues will be going back down to a standard rate of probably around $40 million. This is a 5-year comparison of your expenditures. If you just look at the chart, it's very misleading because it looks like your salaries and employee benefits are actually decreasing. But this is looking at it as a total amount of your expenditures. as a percentage of that. And your purchase services and your supplies and things like that are actually increasing at a higher rate than your salaries and benefits. So if you look at your salaries actually increased from 194 million to 214 million. So you are increasing salaries and benefits. It's just they're not increasing at the rate that your purchase services are increasing. This is a 5-year comparison of your reserve ratio and average daily attendance. You are at 28.9% reserve ratio. It has increased the last couple of years due to those COVID funds coming in. Obviously, you can see that with the charts and everything. And then the average daily attendance this year is back up. That's good to see. With DESE paying on the highest of 3 years, this past year will be your high dollar number or your high attendance number. So just continue to track that going forward. While we're here, we look at Missouri laws and regulations. If we see any violations in budgeting or attendance, transportation, contract bidding, things like that, we bring it to your attention. And you can see here that it says it's fairly stated, so another clean opinion. While we're here, we look at internal control. We don't give an opinion on internal control, but we use it in our risk assessment. If we come across any deficiencies in internal control, we bring it to your attention. And you'll see here that it says we did not identify any deficiencies in internal control. You have more than $750,000 of federal expenditures, so you're required to have a uniform guidance audit or a single audit or a federal programs audit. And this is the report for that audit, and you'll see that it says that it is, we did not identify any deficiencies. So this is another clean opinion on the federal program side of things. And this is the summary for that federal audit. Unmodified means clean opinion or good audit report. No all the way down is exactly what you want to see. That means there's no findings, no question costs, no comments, except for the bottom one. We'll talk about that in a second. And you can see that we did our testing in Title I cluster and then also the Education Stabilization Fund. So that's your ESSER dollars. That was the other cluster that we did our testing in. And then the bottom one, did you qualify as a low-risk auditee? It's no. When they wrote uniform guidance, they wrote it for accrual basis financial statements, and 99% of the school districts in the state of Missouri are cash basis financial statements, so you will not qualify as low risk. So do not change your financial statements to accrual basis. You don't want to do that. Stay cash basis. Just know that it requires us to audit a higher percentage of your federal programs. This is the no comments, no findings on the federal program side of things. So exactly what you want to see in your audited financial statements. So overall, a good year financially, about as clean as you can get recommendations wise. So any questions for me?
I have a question. Using the ESSER's funds, which are currently at 67, you said it will go back to around 40, which was our previous. For 2020 and 2019, it was closer between 27 and 29. Is it going back to 27, 29, or is it going back to closer to 40?
It'll be all about timing of how much you draw down and things like that. So your 2021 is a little bit higher than normal. So I would say go to your administration and they'll give you a clearer picture on your budget. And if administration wants to chime in, I'll let them chime in on what we're looking at for federal revenues this year, if you know.
If I remember right, ESSER dollars allocated this year, it's 28 million, and then next year, the ESSER dollars are actually go to 7 million. So we do have additional dollars specific to federal funds. I don't know that number right offhand, but that's the comparison of what we have for ESSER this year, and then what we will have ESSER next year.
And then any new programs they come up with surplus federal dollars as well.
Do you have any other questions right now? Okay. Any other questions from board members? Okay. And of course, we had an opportunity to review this. It's not the first time that we have seen this. Thank you for coming and doing a public presentation. The recommended action is that the board accepts the 2022-2023 financial audit as presented. Do I have a motion?
So moved. Second.
Motion from Board Member Kreis, second from Board Member Thomas Tate. Any further discussion? Seeing none, we will vote.
Thank you.
Thank you, Brian.
Yes, thank you, Brian.
Where's my tree?
Motion carries 7-0. Moving on to item 8.01, the treasurer's report. And Dr. Shaw is going to join us again.
Good evening. The budget amendment and transfer report that you see does represent the month of October. A couple of items to point out that you may see that are new. 2 additional state funding allocations are for the second round of school safety funds from DESE, as well as the one-time dollars of Get Out of Lead testing funds, which will assist with all of the testing and potentially filters that we need to put in place. Those are all just new one-time dollars that we've received. We do have a continuous operating budget above 26%, so balance continues to maintain where we've had it. Shout out to Kara Stasel and her team for continuously providing great reports while still trying to gel 2 different systems as we continue that transition over to Oracle. So they continue to do a great job with the reports that were provided. So any questions at this time?
All right, and the board has had an opportunity to ask questions via email. Are there any further questions from the board at this time? Okay, the recommended action is that the board approves the treasurer's report as presented. Do I have a motion?
I make a motion that we move.
Okay. Motion from Board Member McCoskey. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second from Board Member Thomas Tate. Any further discussion? Seeing none, we will vote. Motion carries 7-0. Moving on to item 9.01, we received this information and presentation during the November 14th study session on the performance contract for Carver, Sequiota, and Disney Elementary. The recommended action is that the board approves the performance contract with Verigy LLC as presented. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Motion from Board Member Thomas Tate. Do I have a second?
I second that.
Second from Board Member McCoskey. Any further discussion?
Yes.
Board Member Byrne.
So I think it's great that, okay, so it seems like we've done our research. Verigy seems like a competent company who we've had great recommendations from other districts on, that they can get the work done. It makes sense to me that there will be savings on going geothermal. To what extent, I don't know. What concerns me a little bit about the way this is presented to us is that we're being asked to approve the full 14 million. And we haven't really been given much indication as to the risk factor of not being able to receive the IRA rebate of about $5.5 million. So the idea is that we'll spend 8.6, which would keep us in line with what we budgeted. That's great. And if we were voting on a contract of 8.6, it would be a no-brainer. Like, everything is great. It's green. Can you not hear me? So would we be voting on a contract of 8.6? Seems like Verigy would be the company to use. It's 8.6. We get a geothermal system. We get cost savings. All of that's great. But we're actually voting on a $14 million contract, and no real guarantees on if the $5.5 million is ever going to come through. So if a portion of that or all of that does not come through, we've already approved the $14 million. We'll never have a say again in that, and we'll end up being massively over budget on what we budgeted for this project. If there were a way for us to vote on an $8.6 million contract, I would vote yes on this. Or if there was a way to have Verigy participate in the risk or help guide us through that process. For example, if this was a contract I was entering into, I may say something to the contractor, in this case Verigy, something along the lines of, upon completion of project, we'll pay you the complete $8.6 million, and we'll pay you the remaining 5.4, AKA the rebate, once the rebate is received in full. Something to that nature. It seems to me it would be responsible to bake into that contract to hold Verigy accountable to help us see through this process and be ensured that we get the maximum amount of those funds as possible. Or maybe I'm missing something and it's just a full guarantee, but I've asked and it just hasn't really been made clear to me that, that there is no risk here that the full $5.4 million won't be received. So I guess what I'm saying is, if I've asked the question, I don't know if there's a good answer. Can we either vote on an $8.6 million contract, or can we get more assurances that the $5.4 million will be received, is what I'm left with. And without those things, I'm thinking, how can I improve a $14 million contract, which is $5.5 million over our budget, without one of those two things?
And I think that question was posed in an email and responded. Were there further questions?
No, it was responded to, but it didn't answer everything I just said.
My understanding is that the answer is no. The full contract is $14 million and the anticipated rebate is $5.4 million.
The anticipated rebate. So the answer is no, we're accepting the risk. We're accepting a $5.5 million risk to get the rebate.
My understanding from the presentation was that the risk was of not receiving those, that rebate was minimal to, nil. It was a very small risk, and it felt like an appropriate level of risk for us to take.
If it's minimal, then why wouldn't Verigy accept some of that risk? Why should we bear all of it?
We should have asked them when they were here. I don't know.
Well, I did, and we've had, and I really haven't gotten much more of an answer in the interim.
Well, the answer has been no, and they shared. And as it relates to any other contract that we present, there's always, from the standpoint, the contract and the ask is the $14 million. But this is similar to when we do E-rates and we get reimbursement. We are as a district, but the company, the way we bid and posted the project, they bid on the project at this cost with the understanding that they would help us go through the process to apply for the rebate. But that's not a risk that because at the end of the day, the government is making the decision on the final allocation as it relates to the rebate. And it's similar to when we go buy a washing and dryer or a water heater at our house and you send that form in to get your rebate back. So the answer, honestly speaking, was no, and that they would not take that risk. And no other school district, and I believe I sent you about a list of 10 other school districts that we were asked to get a recommendation from, and they went through the same entire process. I know the amounts were different at the time that they entered into a contract.
So, sorry. Do you have any further comment or question?
Not at this time.
So when you make the analogy to a washer dryer, am I understanding correctly that you have to spend the $14 million to get the $5 million rebate? So you can't, for example, pay Verigy $8.6 million and then ask for the rebate, and then once you have the rebate in hand, pass it on to Verigy?
That is correct. Like I said, the contract is for the $14 million. They will help and assist us with the application, which is, I think, a one-page application.
I don't mean the contract. Yeah. I meant.
But no, the amount is $14 million.
And in order to get the rebate, because the rebate is 40%, do you have to spend $14 million to get the 5.4, or can we rewrite the contract and just spend 8.6 and then ask the federal government for 5.4 million rebate?
I want to verify. My understanding is we write the contract for the $14 million, and with the understanding, and then we apply for the rebate. So the contract to produce, like I said, we can't rewrite the contract. I know. So the answer is no, not rewriting the contract for $18 million. The contract would be for the 14. Once we enter into the contract, we produce the paperwork and documentation. If I'm wrong, please correct me. I think we've gone through this from all the questions to make sure. And then we would submit the evidence of the board-approved agenda and the contract where the board approved this amount, and then we would be reimbursed the $5 million.
My question has nothing to do with the contract. Let's say there is no contract and we're getting ready to write a contract. could could you ask for a rebate not having spent 14 million? Can you spend 8 million, 8.6, and then ask for a rebate?
It's a great question. Whatever what you spend, you ask, but that 8 million will not cover the 3 schools, number one. And if we change this, we have to go back out for bid and start this process over again.
When you said what you spend, you ask. So I guess what I'm hearing is, no, you have to spend the 14 to get the 5 million rebate.
Yes, because it's based on the value of the amount, yes.
Okay,
Yes.
so the 40% is off of the 14 million.
Yes.
So I'd like to clarify, because that was something that I received in the email that leads me to believe that there was confusion on the question. By implying that we contract for 8.6 million, there's a difference between the contract and the money spent. I'm not saying there should be no question if we get the 3 projects done. The question is, what are we actually approving? And it just seems to me that the board should be asked to approve 8.6, because that's what we're intending to spend.
We're asking you to approve the $14 million. That's what
And
we're
I'm
asking
saying
the
it
board.
should be that the board is being asked to approve 8.6.
But we can't get a rebate until we spend the 14.
So this is the question, and maybe this is a question for Travis. At what point do we apply for the rebate?
The project has to be completed in order to get the rebate.
Okay.
Now, there's only 5.4 roughly million dollars that are eligible for that rebate, because there's other things within the project that are not the geothermal and they're not the domestic items. But yes, the project has to be completed before you will receive that rebate.
Okay, so what I proposed is saying, it seems to me logical that we would enter into a contract that says that we will pay up to 8.6 upon completion, help us go through the rebate process, we'll get the rebate, and should we get the entire amount of the rebate, we'll pay you the remaining amount of that contract. It seems like something along that lines would have been possible to do in a contract.
Correct me if I'm
But
wrong. I
without
don't
doing
think
that, we're left holding the bag for the full risk of the $5.4 million. Verigy gets their 14 no matter what, and we just get, hopefully, some amount back.
Can you speak as to how contractors get paid?
So,
Go ahead.
go ahead. No, you go
So I did have
Turn on your.
a quick question. What was the cost of the conventional HVAC system?
It was, I believe, a little over 12.2 million
12.2 million.
with no rebates eligible.
And that was the most appropriate bid, the lowest and most feasible bid was at 12. for all
That was
3.
the only other bid that we received
Which-
for a performance contract.
Right, so the budgeted amount, we couldn't have made regardless of whether it was geothermal or not?
Right, geothermal allows us to get the projects completed and be within the budget that we have allocated.
And the systems last longer.
They last longer, they're more efficient. I mean, they've indicated we'll save 20 to 30% in energy costs on those 3 schools. And something to point out, this is not new money that the federal government just has come out with. These dollars have been allocated for several years. What is new is that now they have said, you know what, public entities and schools specifically are now eligible for these dollars. If we wanted to put solar would be something that would be eligible with this now that schools has been added. So geothermal is specifically listed, domestic product is specifically listed, schools are specifically listed. So yes, if we were to not fill out the paperwork, then we're obviously not going to get the rebate. But filling the paperwork out appropriately once a project is completed, then there is a very minimal chance that we won't receive those dollars.
Did you explore anything like any kind of incentive for Verigy? Something along the lines of, we'll hold back $500,000 till the end. Something to have them have skin in the game so that they help us through the process so that we know that they bear some of the risk that we will get this $5.5 million.
My understanding is that they worked with other districts and that was
But not with this program, not with the rebate program, because that part is new to
They're
districts.
currently working with other districts and the rebate has been paid before. And it's a 1-page, Verity was here 2 weeks ago to ask these questions and they indicated to us it was a 1-page document.
fine, it may be a one-page document, but that still doesn't answer the risk question. I posed this question, and my understanding was that this is a new program. Schools have not gone through the rebate program to be able for us to understand how it works and what the risk is.
That is correct. That is my understanding. And they're here, so they can clarify.
Oh.
I mean, isn't that the four gentlemen in the front? Same guys?
Yes, it is.
Hi.
It is, yes, yes.
My question is, your total cost of the project is, you've estimated to be 14 million, okay? 88,000 and change, and you didn't put any risk money in the contract, all right? Okay, for this type of contract that they're proposing. Otherwise, probably the cost would be greater if you put money in the contract in case you didn't get the $5 million rebate. Am I correct in saying that?
There's definitely an incentive for us to make sure you guys get that because.
Right.
What's the incentive for you?
Additional work.
80% of our projects in Missouri and.
Sage, can you go up to the podium? That way there's a microphone.
My name's Sage. I've been with Verigy for about 15 years. We've worked in hundreds of districts in Missouri, and one of the biggest incentives for us is that all of our work is done by word of mouth. And if you're the largest district in Missouri, if we don't do a good job, we don't come through, that means the end of our business. That's one big incentive. And obviously, to your point, there is very minimal risk, but the ITC has been around since 2005, and it's never been redacted. It's always been increased. The only difference now, it's not new at all. It's just new available to schools. And so again, like if you bought to her example, if you bought a Tesla, you buy that and you pay for the whole thing, and then you get a tax credit at the end of the year. It's the same thing. You do have to spend the money, and the system has to be energized before they will send you that rebate. So I don't know if there's any other questions about. I don't know if that answered your question.
There any?
I have a question. You indicated, Dr. Shaw, that we could apply at the completion of the project, correct? Okay. Do we have an estimated time frame of when we could do that, of when it will be complete? And maybe that's for these gentlemen.
Yeah, that may be a better question for their schedule.
Yes, we will be complete November of next year. We'll be substantially complete in October.
So it'll take a year, a little less than a year,
From
perhaps.
approval of the contract. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I would add that the question was posed about checking with other districts. And we were given written communication that 13 other districts were contacted and gave very favorable reports of this particular company. And they are districts that have worked with them, and I understand your point, Board Member Byrne, about what's their skin in the game. I think they have a huge skin in the game in terms of what's been presented here and their professional reputations. So there are no guarantees in life, and I do appreciate your fiscal conservative viewpoint. I do. I think everybody sitting up here is fiscally conservative to some degree and careful in terms of public money. But I also think that this particular project has been vetted very carefully and a lot of homework has been done. And I'm not in favor of turning it back or changing what we've already approved.
And to clarify, I haven't questioned Verigy or their competence. In fact, I led with complimenting that they seem to be the group to handle this. I'm questioning the reason why we are left holding the entirety of the bag of 5.4 million of a rebate. That's it.
Well, I guess the rebate is for the government. From what I read, the rebate is for the governmental entity. They don't get the rebate. I mean, it would come to us because of the way it's written.
Well, it's a $5.4 million rebate on a $14 million contract. If we weren't getting the rebate, or the idea of us getting the rebate, I don't know that we would be using Verigy at $14 million. We have another bid in for $12 million for a different type of system, but we only had one other bid. I mean, that is obviously a very big factor playing into why we were choosing to go this route, is the idea of this $5.4 million. Because if it was just $14 million, we'd probably have a lot more questions going, well, why did we budget 8.5 and now we're spending 14?
Do you have any reason to believe the rebate will not be given when it's been, you said since 2005, this program has been around? They're in this industry, but do you have any reason to believe that the rebate will not be given?
We were told that this had not happened for schools yet, and that there was a limited pot of money, and that there was a 40% rebate, 30% of which we were eligible for being geothermal, and 10% for it being American-made. To me, that's a lot of reasons that some portion of that $5.4 million could not make it into our hands. For what reason? I don't know. I gave you a few. But if it's such a guaranteed thing, again, I would ask the question, then why wouldn't Verigy participate in some level in us getting it? They obviously want our business. We are the largest district in the state. So the idea that, well, we don't want to screw it up because we're the largest district in the state, well, also you want our contract because we're the largest district in the state. So we do have some leverage to negotiate some things. And I just don't want any chance of us being asked as a board to spend $14 million. I'm sorry, to spend $8.6 million is what we're thinking. But somewhere between now and next November, it ends up being more than that.
I have a question for Dr. Shaw. Dr. Shaw, what has been budgeted? Is it 8.5 or 9 million? I don't recall.
Yeah, it's 8.5, I believe. I don't know the exact dollar amount.
So if everything works out, we're just 150,000 over budget.
So when I checked on this price, we have other HVAC projects that were budgeted this year. Some of those have come in less than we expected. And so when I spoke with our director of facilities, he indicated that the 8.6 will fit within the overall budget for HVAC.
And actually, if I could speak, I do 40% of the 14,088,085 is 5.635, 234. So there's.
No, but not all of it is.
Oh, okay, we're not
Not
getting.
all of it is American-made, or some of it, like the gymnasiums, are going to be traditional rooftops.
Okay,
right?
so I'm just saying there's a $200,000 difference there.
Yeah, that's
What
correct.
is that?
In the event, and they indicated there will be some rooftop units, as she mentioned. Those are not eligible for that rebate.
Okay,
So
thank
that's
you.
why there's that
Gotcha.
difference, Scott.
Now I get it. Had to beat it in my head, but okay. Thank you.
Thanks for trying.
But I think if we were going to do this type of contracting, we would have had to put that in the original scope of work and the original specs that were sent out to everybody.
Correct.
And then you would have, if I'm just thinking myself, putting yourself in your shoes, I deal with this all the time, that you would have probably increased your cost or your bid amount to take on that risk. So we would be paying more. And I'm seeing it shaking the head, yes. Okay, thank you.
Right, any further discussion or comments?
I don't have the contract here. How come you?
Seeing none, we do have a motion in a second, correct? Yes, okay, and we'll move to voting.
Could you read the motion,
Yes,
please?
the motion, or the recommended action and motion, is that the board approve the contract, sorry, it just popped up, that the board approve the performance contract with Verigy LLC as presented. I believe Board Member Thomas Tate made the motion and Board Member McCoskey seconded it.
Yes.
Oh, it is up there.
My authentication to the server has been lost.
I'm going to close that one down. I'm going to confuse myself.
It will sometimes log out, but if you go to the URL and hit it again.
It's still verbal.
I don't have just Judy's.
The motion passes for the approval of the performance contract with Verigy, 6 in favor, 1 abstention. Moving on to item 10.01, quality learning environments from our strategic plan, our objective 4.01. Dr. Shaw is joining us again.
Good evening again. In January 17th of this year, we approved a contract with MGT of America to conduct a district boundary and demographic study, which was going to focus around elementary schools. Davis Demographics, which is a company within MGT, performed that work over the last 8 to 10 months. And so they are here this evening to provide you with a formal presentation. You've received the report previously that they provided as well. And so I will step away from the podium and introduce to you Lauren Woods and Cameron Arsenault. Did I get that right? All right. So I will turn it over to them and let them give their presentation.
Awesome. Thank you. All right, look at that. So it's got a laser tube shooting the eye.
Just make sure you're in front of the podium.
It's perfect. Hey, good evening. I'm going to do a little of the talking, and then as we get further in, I'll bring Cameron in because he makes everybody a lot happier than me. I'm just an old gruffy football coach. Not really. Everybody likes me. We really appreciate you all having us here. It's been fun collecting information, working with the district staff, putting this information together. GIS nerds, that's what we're made out of our firm. We are all about spatial relationships and getting into the data within the district, trying to create tools for your decision makers, kind of giving you a different look and feel of what's going on in the district. Do it one more time. Heck with it. Let's see, click that. There we go. When we're going through this process, there were five parts of this. We're data collection, working with staff to make sure we have the right student files, because the foundation of the work, it's the students on top of the geographies within the area, the attendance zones. And those attendance zones we broke up into study areas. And then we also researched local information, other things that affect growth, decline in the area. We are looking at the current dynamics of the district, looking at the relationships of how many kids live in an area, comparing it from year to year to kind of give us an idea of the spatial cohort relationships within the district. Once we have all that, it sounds easy. That's 80% of the work. It's daunting. Then we develop some phasing and summary information that starts off the fun stuff, which is guiding the community stakeholders in their decision-making with facilities and boundary planning. We need to know these things to help us understand these and to make people like Cameron's life easier when he starts to show you these rezoning, because all that stuff is stacked on top of each other to allow you to get this information and be able to convey the message. Nothing's in a black box. We tell you how to bake the cake. If you read the report, we tell you what parts go into making all the information. We're telling you that if you're having this many students showing up in kindergarten based off of this many children, these children that were born 5 years earlier, and you see this trend, we apply that information to understand your pre-K and K enrollments in the future. Your mobility numbers, I'm not talking about mobility coming in and out of apartments, but I mean the overall movement within your student population from year to year. Like when you're doing a cohort analysis tabularly in the HR department to figure out what you need next year, we're looking at how many kindergartners were there last year, the first graders this year, and from 2020 kindergartners to 2021 first graders, and seeing what type of movements are happening within the neighborhoods, identifying areas that are aging out. And then the other part is understanding the development that's going on in the area and applying a student generation to what those type of homes are creating and forecasted student population that's coming from that type of development. First thing, data verification is the most important part. it looks like a simple sheet of paper, right? It's your student population in a tabular format that, as an accountant, I can go in there and these things need to add up. And then when I start showing you things down the road, those numbers need to add up with that sheet. So you're going to see attendance matrices. Those attendance matrices need to match up with the total enrollment on these sheets. That's something further on in the presentation. Wait, there's more moment. Knowing where the kids are, understanding that we have the right student data, and then geocoding the students to the world. That's an image of the students to the world. That's 4 years of students stacked on top of each other. The bigger dot is from 4 years ago. The smallest dot is this year. We do not zoom into an area. We don't share student locations at a short scale. But if you look closely, you can start seeing there's a lot of big dots with nothing stacked on top of it. Those would be areas that are starting to age out. Or you see areas where there's all 4 years of colors stacked on top of each other. That's an area of regreening or continual growth. Kids are still showing up in that area. Knowing where the kids are, knowing your attendance zones, then we can start looking at splitting the attendance zones up into planning units called study areas. The image on the right are study areas. Those numbers don't mean the number of kids. That's the unique ID number for that study area. Each one of these study areas has something specific that is affecting it. Either it's a zip code with the birth rates that are affecting that one zip code that fall within that area, or the student population shifting, or there's a housing development in that area. But identifying them individually like that allows us to aggregate up into other information, whether we look at a summary for the attendance zones or rezones or what area a zip code is in growth or things like that. The geography matters in this case. We want to know these things because part of the task was identifying trends within the district's school population that the community stakeholders want to understand when it's time to start boundary adjustments or looking at underutilization. We're going to talk about that a lot tonight. Or not a lot, I'm not going to drone in on it, but you'll see snapshots. We've geocoded the kids of the world, but the most telling part is if we put the dots up there, it doesn't do any good. But if you turn it on and you run a density script, GIS makes the wonders of the world, right? It's a weather map of your student population. You know kids are going to school in all these places, but now you have some more context. There are a lot of kids where those areas are bright yellow. I know this because Cameron told me that's yellow and red up there. You do have children in other parts of the district, but we're looking at the density of everything. We don't want to look at every single dot. We want to let you visually see. We know there's a lot of kids, but they're not everywhere. They're condensed into certain areas within the district. Now, knowing where the kids are geocoded, understanding the densities of the population, you have a big spreadsheet within your report. It's called an attendance matrix for your elementary school population. It tells you, like for instance with Bingham, there are 366 students that live in that zone that are enrolled at that school. That's that very top right bold corner where it says 366. Within that attendance zone of that grade configuration, there are 480 students that actually live in that zone. So it shows you how many kids live there and how many kids are living there and enrolling at their home campus. And you notice how it staircases all the way down, just like when we used to see the multiplication table, right? Similar thing, just look over Fremont, that's Fremont's number. Fremont's 448. There's 359 that live in Fremont and attend their school. And if you want to know where the other kids are enrolled from, just follow that column down. This is a small snapshot. Everybody, I'm sorry you can see the whole thing. It's like a big spreadsheet because you have a lot of elementary areas. We did the same thing for your middle school and high schools. What's significant about looking at your open enrollment reports? You know, I know I know that I know clients that we've worked with for years, this is their first thing they ask for as soon as we geocode the kids. Because they used to spend weeks putting this together by hand. In a Thomas Guide, Cameron Thomas Guide's a fold-out map. Getting a Thomas Guide out and identifying neighborhoods and doing it by hand. Well, having it in GIS, we know where the kids live, we know where they're enrolled, and then we can calculate out the actual number of kids. It's, you know, from the accounting side of my mind, very cool, but my wife would call me a nerd. The neat thing about doing this, though, is several years ago, MGT did a capacity analysis for you all. If you remember that. Well, knowing where the kids are and knowing where they're enrolled and knowing all that fun stuff, we can then start looking at the utilization. And we were talking about we're focusing on elementaries more in this part of the study. And we have three schools in the center of the city. They just happen to be abutting each other that are low compared to most schools, where most elementary schools would be. Boyd, Robertson, and Weaver. And knowing what the forecasts are for these areas, we were able to also include what the utilization is this year at the fall snapshot, the data that we received in early October, and what it's going to be 5 years and 10 years from now. And as you look across those highlighted numbers, you can see nothing's going to change in those, physically change at those areas. They're underutilized. They're going to continue to be underutilized. Boyd houses that pre-K program, which helps keep the enrollment up, but still, it's a brand new campus. It's an awesome campus that is underutilized. Fun with charts. This was never shared early on in the process because just didn't think about, we look at the chart and look at that and you can just start lining them up. Well, someone said, why don't we just overlay the current enrollment on top of the utilization so at least there's more visual, and so these are all the schools. You can kind of see what the relationships are there. Not very many schools are at utilization. And then the wonders of GIS, thanks Cameron for doing this. We're able to show you the spatial locations and a visual and a color code, because everybody likes these maps, of the center of the district. You see the three campuses in elementary, same ones that were noted in the matrices. Under-enrolled. And we have middle and we have high school. And you'll see in subsequent pages we'll have what they look like in the forecast. Now, people, you all have housing development that's going online. Housing development is helping offset changes within the district. It helps balance, areas of decline. There's areas of growth, and that's great. Just imagine if you did not have housing development in this forecast. There would be a more of a decrease in the student population in the next several years. Housing development is helping offset shifts within the historic and current populations. I'm sorry about this chart. It looks snazzier when I'm actually using a PowerPoint. It's supposed to point out the impacts of housing impact all 10 years, all grade levels. Just because they're building 500 homes next year or building 500 homes at a development, they're not building 500 homes immediately. It's usually they tier up, right? 75 homes, 100 homes, maybe 125, and then they're finished after about 5 or 6 years. Well, you have to spread that out over 5 or 6 years and overall all the grade levels. That red line, impact from mobility. That's basically just telling us and showing us what the effects are of the trends within the neighborhoods and what a class will look like in 10 years. So if you follow that K class that's at 1611, Eventually, it's junior year, 10 years out, it's about 1,800 students. So it's giving you a perspective of what's going on. It helps identify bubbles within the population. In the report, you're going to look at specifics, more specific information. You're going to see a detail of the grade breakdown for the summaries of each one of the schools. You'll start seeing, oh, this is what Lauren's talking about. There's a bubble in the southeast part of the district. That's why I see this. That's why we see this effect occurring. Or interior-wise, there's no ebb and flow. It's just static. One of the things that we will touch on in the summary section, but one of the things that you have going for you is you've had an increase in your pre-K population, which helps bolster your younger grades. Pardon me. Let's see if I can back up one. That bottom level, when it says those bottom subtotals, resident student totals by grade configuration. If you hear the word resident student population, these are Springfield kids that are enrolled in Springfield schools that live within your boundaries. And then when we go to the next one, you have a non-student population. You have a non-student population of students that are attending from outside the area. They can be teachers' kids, they can be on programs, things like that. One thing to note is that it had declined for a couple of years, then picked back up, and now it's around 500 kids this past October. Charts and things. I like this just because it quickly helps you identify the growth areas. These are the attendance areas that are expected to see the growth, and then the areas that are expected to experience decline. And you're going to look, when you go into the report, there's going to be separate summaries of these so you can start looking at, oh, I see, this one's had a unusually small several years of class size, and it's affecting it as it's matriculating through. Same thing with the middle and high school areas. You have Cherokee, which is going to, which right now is identified as one that's going to have the greatest loss, and Kickapoo High School at the high school level. Remember that chart where we overlaid the utilization and the forecast and the current enrollment? Well, here it is with those three schools identified with the 2028 enrollment forecast. What do we see here? We see that all the schools now are underutilized. There was a high school that was at full utilization. Now it's starting to decline. Here's the utilization map again. Do you remember that city center area they had Weaver and Boyd and Robertson? What else is there now? I can't see because I don't have my glasses. So, but the campus, I think, is that Weaver? Weller. Right to the immediate east of the center city area by is expected to be underutilized. It's that city center area, center city area. And then 10 years out. Now, it gets a little more murky as you go 10 years out, right? There's only so much data that you can have that's solid, but still the trends are continuing. And then another utilization map, as you see down in the middle schools in the southwest are now starting to experience underutilization. And that's just timing. It's 10 years from now. It may be different in 3 years if we revisit this or something happens with the housing market or, but for now, based off of what we have, 10 years from now, you could see that in the middle school area. But this is why you do it, right? It helps you identify areas well in advance that you say, maybe we should take a peek at that in another 3 years. Help get ahead of changes. Don't be putting out fires. You want to get ahead of these things. That's what's nice about doing it like this and doing it with GIS. We can help you figure out specifically the areas of change. And that's the neat thing about doing it with GIS and doing it with planning areas is now that we can identify some hot spots. Growth areas. red's growth in this case. You'll see that we have these smaller polygons. They're not big numbers. The largest number is 92 students of change in 10 years. Pretty good. It's enough that you can plan advance for, but think about it. Look at the other areas of the district where they're light green or green. These are the areas that are in decline, and so you can see what I'm talking about. There's some areas that are growing, some areas are offsetting the declines. If you see big polygons, some people always ask me, if you see big polygons, think of it being a very, let's say open space, agricultural area, not very many people. If you see a dense, small polygons, higher density, more kids are in that area, so we wanted to make sure we were identifying areas that had between 50 to 75 kids in a geography, because the eventual work leads into what we're going to talk about at the end, which is what happens when you rezone. Well, when you rezone, you want to avoid radical changes, crossing over and moving large populations. You want to move small groups of neighborhoods at a time to look at what those changes will be, and not trying to guess by grabbing a whole polygon. That was PK through 12. This is the elementary, middle, and high school. 10-year rate of change. Let's keep in mind that it's talking about the student population within that grade configuration over the next 10 years. You can see the little hot spots. You see there's a relationship in some of the grade configurations all the way up and down the line. In some areas that you just say, oh, well, it's not there, it's gray in the middle school, and next thing you know, look at the high school. That one polygon that looks like an L in the northwest of the north central part of the district is starting to pick up. Not a big number, though. I think it's like 25 students in growth. Your population, you all are in a good spot. I deal with districts that are in California. The exodus is it's a struggle because I think people are still trying to figure out what's going on. They thought it was just a COVID bubble, and I said, no, it's other things than that. But you all have a population, I would say this is a very stable population. It's just that it's shifting within the boundaries now. Those ebbs and flows within the boundaries. And so this is what a good point to think about is you all don't have to put out fires. You can just now address things without having to think about, oh my gosh, we got to build a wing because we have 800 kids showing up. That's a district I'm dealing with down in Texas right now. And they build schools every 3 years. And it's just, for them, I just feel bad. The superintendent's gone gray since I've known him. Sorry, Dr. Latham. No, not you. It's not a big number. You're not suffering a big decline. It's what we go into individual areas within the report specifically to show the changes. I've already touched on your out-of-district numbers declined slightly. I don't know if that's an enrollment practice change because remember it was lower a couple years ago, it almost doubled in a couple years. One of the things that I'm sure you're all aware of that your pre-K programs have expanded. That Boyd, I don't know how long Boyd's had the pre-K program, but you could see that that's helped out with an increase in that student population. Within the middle school population, there is, when I talked about bubbles, you'll see a bubble coming through. These are kids that were born right after or right before, it's the back end now of the housing crisis, the last housing crisis. So these are the kids that are moving up into the middle school. That's that small wave that people are experiencing at some of the campuses right now. They're going up into the high school areas. Pardon me. When you think about this, we're looking at it at a general population. These are general population statements. So we look at other areas specifically, so your high schools, like we see Central has a small resident population in the area, but it houses programs. We drove by there today, watching the kids get out of school. Tried turning left in front of the school. Doesn't work too well. So there's other elements that you all are providing that are offsetting some of these shifts at the attendance zone level. Now, getting to the really what the pressures are within the district and the needs of the community stakeholders and the facility planning part of your group. We want to make sure we identified immediately that the central city areas are the areas that were under enrolled. And it's not anything other than there's just not a population to fill all those at 80, 85%, whatever you want to at an elementary area. The other part was we were tasked with the task force asked what if, which allows us with GIS, what if Pershing Elementary was removed and just went back to Pershing Middle School? And so we'll talk about that. I said Cameron will talk about that a little bit. But the idea is, the intent is to relieve, or rezoning will help relieve some of this capacity issues that are affecting the lack of seats, the lack of students in seats. Because when you have a school that's underutilized, what happens is sometimes they don't get the full curriculum. They just don't have enough, there's just not enough kids there to have that whole thing that you'd want them to have. Or I'm going to say this, you all are in a great spot because it allows you to modernize campuses without really impacting a population. Sort of like when I worked with a company, when I worked with Oceanside in California, they were in your situation, they're in decline. But they just modernized each campus. They'd close a campus and they would have very little, there was like a campus that was the campus they went to for 18 months while the other school got rebuilt. And that's basically what they did. And then they closed the temporary campus eventually. But the population was familiar with, hey, we're getting a brand new school in 18 months, or we're getting new wings put on. And they addressed their underutilization by slowly modernizing and then eventually closing a campus that was the temporary housing campus. It was a cool model. Oh, good. This is Cameron's part. Cameron? And as you look at this, when you see those white outlines, think of them as study areas, those polygons. So we're moving polygons and not moving streets and things. We're just moving a population.
All right. So, yeah, like I said, I'm Cameron. I've been with Davis for about a year now. I'm going to go over some boundary changes. So we're looking at several different possibilities for, again, Roberson Elementary, and then later on we'll get to Pershing, changing that from a K into a middle school. So right now, Roberson has the capacity to hold 343 students. Right now it has 148 students living there. I believe the enrollment's a little bit higher than that. So that means it's operating at about a little under 50% of its capacity. It's one of them which we would consider an inefficient use of space. And then using the forecast we have over time, we project that the number of resident students in this area will decline by about 50 students or so. So we prepared two different scenarios for each possibility. Either closing Roberson Elementary, sending the students in that zone to one of the adjacent campuses, or expanding Roberson, modernizing the campus, having it take in more kids from other areas. One possibility that we prepared, closing Roberson, would be splitting it between Bowerman Elementary and Fremont along Kearney Street and National Avenue. And then in this next slide here, we showed these are what the impacts would be if we did that over currently and in the next 5 and 10 years. So as it stands right now, Bowerman is currently operating about 75% capacity. Fremont is a little bit higher than that. They're projected to either decline or remain more or less stable. And then if those students in Roberson were moved to those two campuses, then those campuses would be operating closer to 100% capacity. So they would have potentially the space to absorb those students, but again, there could be some issues with that. All right. Another possibility that we're considering is sending the entire zone, the entirety of Roberson to Boyd Elementary, which would be 148 resident students in grades kindergarten through 5. And then the impacts of that would be Boyd would have the space to hold those students. It would be, if it took in all the students currently zoned to Roberson, it would be operating at about 80% capacity, going down to 70% over the next 5 to 10 years. All right. Do you have any questions so far about any areas that have been moved so far? All right. I'll move on. So the next possibility we explored for expanding Roberson would be having it move east, kind of taking the students currently zoned to Fremont, along that little strip between Kearney and the railroads all the way down to the freeway. And with that, it would be taking in 105 students that currently go to Fremont. And then with that change, Roberson would take in more students, but over time, that area is still experiencing some decline, so it would go down to by over the next 5 to 10 years, operating at around 55% of its capacity. And then Fremont, by losing those students, would decline to about 65%. The next option we're exploring is instead of having Roberson take in a bunch of students that go to one school, it would kind of take in just a smaller number of students that go to a lot of different schools, so it would move north and take in students from currently 3 different zones, Truman, Watkins, and Fremont. And then with that plan, again, Roberson would move up to about 65% capacity. Fremont would stay, wouldn't change too much, around 75. And then same for these other 2 schools, would change somewhat, but not too drastically.
Give me a second here, bud.
Mm-hmm.
There we go.
There we go, it's better. All right. Over to Pershing. So currently there's 151 students in grades K through 5 that reside in the Pershing attendance zone. And as it states on the slide, the Community Task Force on Facilities is recommending that the school district explore changing it from just a middle school. So we're exploring different scenarios of where the students currently attending Pershing could be moved to. So Plan 1 would be dividing the area between Field Elementary and Wilder Elementary, kind of splitting it right down the middle along the railroad line. And then again, the impacts of that to our forecast. Again, both those would be operating, both these schools would be operating at or slightly above capacity with those new students. And then another option we explored was if we were to keep all of those students in that zone together, have them all move together to one school. The nearest school that currently has the most room is Pittman Elementary, so we explored moving those 151 students into Pittman. And then that would bring the capacity to 104%, so slightly above 100% capacity, and then that would grow over time to operating at 125%. And then we held a meeting with district staff to discuss other alternatives. We developed another plan that would move all the students into Wilder Elementary, and then to account for that growth in Wilder, Sequiota would move to take some areas that are currently zoned to Wilder, kind of east of that freeway of Blackman Road. And that would be 151 students and 139 students affected respectively. And here's some of the impacts of that. So this would cause Wilder to be operating just below full 100% capacity. Sequiota, because it currently has a bubble right now, it would not be able to take in those students, but over the next 5 to 10 years, it would have the room to hold them. It would be operating about 90% capacity. And I believe that's all the plans we have for today, and I'm happy to go back. We can to some of the other ones.
All right, thank you for that very thorough presentation. I know we've been waiting almost a year for all this information, so, but we've got a lot of schools out there. So I'll open it up to any questions from board members at this time. And this is just for informational purposes at this time. I was gonna say, they covered everything?
Okay, no.
No? Okay.
All right, shoot. Remind me, again, we probably explained it, but remind me again how you develop the population forecast?
So the population forecast for the student population, we look at the birth rates. Birth rates help us understand the kids that aren't in the population yet. They're the kids that were born 5 years ago, right? They help us anticipate what the shifts will be that'll help either tell us what the increases are or decreases are at pre-K and K. Then we look at the mobility, the mobility of the student population. We call it mobility cohort or spatial cohort analysis, where we look at the geocoded kids and compare them from year to year within a study area, within an attendance zone, to help understand what the shifts are within that population. It helps show you areas of decline and growth within the existing population. We look at the housing development to help you understand what you could see from those type of homes coming on board, depending on when the phasing is. Sometimes we don't know, you'll call a developer, you can't get a straight answer, so we end up going, either driving or going on the NAIR map or calling somebody else to find out, what did you hear about this area? I didn't see them break ground yet, though on the books they were supposed to break ground in October. That type of thing. We've done this, I've been doing this for 20 years almost, and so you can drive by a place or you can show me a couple overhead images and I can start telling you what exactly is happening.
I guess I want to get at too is who
Yeah.
in the community do you work with who in the community do you work with to validate some of this data? The chamber, I'm just throwing that out as an example.
We're standalone. We collect the information and help create our findings.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Now, it's not like we just show up and ta-da, it's here. We've been sharing information with the district and with other colleagues in my company to make sure these are does anything look out of ordinary, or is there anything that's always good about our company? We work throughout the country, so if we see something that may be interesting or different for you all, somebody's probably already seen it. It's just now we have a better way of explaining an issue.
Okay,
Yeah.
great, thank you.
Yeah.
And then my next question is, I guess this is really for staff more than anything. You know, we know some of the cost already for Pershing, one of the Pershing options, but is the next step to determine the cost of these options? Or what is the next step?
Thank you for that question. I told you all someone was going to ask, but so the next question is based on the questions tonight, is for the board to hold another discussion possibly at the December board meeting. But if there are questions between now and then, having Cameron and Lauren available through a virtual option to answer any questions. And then at the same time, we're working on looking at a recommendation that we would present to the board based on the conversation. So similar to the process last year when we had the community task force on facilities.
Right.
There was a presentation, information that came,
Right.
then we looked at it and we came back to the board with the recommendation. And so that would be the next step, either the December or January, just based on the tone and tenor of the questions we received from you all and as it relates to next steps.
Okay.
And part of that, like I said, that cost really is also, if there's recommendations to close, then the cost savings as a result of closing schools
sure.
and combining.
And looking at busing as well?
Yes,
And the
all of that
impact on
factors
busing?
in, yes.
Okay.
But we can't get to that next step till we know if this is this true direction that the board wants to continue, the path that the board wants to continue to go down.
Okay. For now, that's all the questions I have.
Okay. Other questions from board members?
Yes.
Oh, I'm sorry.
So to piggyback on Scott's first question in the sort of projections, I was surprised to see some of the schools that were projected to really shrink in population. Do you factor in, because all the things that you said you factored in, do you factor in anything like public or community perception or particular school performance, like anything that might, anything else that might drive someone to seek to move into that school district? Because that seems to be a big factor historically.
We don't go into depth. We don't survey why people are attending a school. Parents vote with their feet. Therefore, the population, that your student population, that information we have, and that's what that attendance, that when we do that cohort methodology, the mobility, when you're looking at student populations, we get to look at what school attendance areas are underperforming or not retaining their population. So I did this. I think we did this practice in an executive session where I said, think of a school that people perceive as not doing well, and then look at in your report. Look at the mobility spreadsheet in your report. There's an actual spreadsheet with the color codes, and there'll be it'll show if it's positive, it'll be over a 1.0. If it's negative, it'll be below a 1.0. Right? It's losing a percentage or two each year in a grade. So look at that in your report. That it'll help you say, oh, I see what Lauren's talking about, and it goes into some detail what was done and what you look at and to understand how we perceive using that information. So your student population is already experiencing that effect. We see it through the last 4 years of student files as we start looking at them specifically within an area. We were not tasked to survey parents. That's not a part of our project.
So is the answer that perception or parents' choice to live in or out of a school district is not necessarily factored into this and could be a big asterisk on future projections?
No. So your population is your customer base. Your customer base is, 75% of the physical population? We did in the report, there's a market share analysis. I think you pick up about 75% of your population. That's what we're looking at. We're looking at that population. You plan for the people that you're working for. You can't plan for the people you're not working for. We have a client that's in part of Texas that been in decline, and they've been worried about charter schools, the boogeyman, and perception. And I said, here's the problem. I know that you all have schools that are doing really well. It's your job to tell the public, we have spotlight schools that we'd love for people to see. School districts in general, public school districts in general, are really bad at marketing the benefits of what their district is doing. Perception, you can't affect people that aren't going to your school. You can't change their minds. They're not going to go to your school. You want to make the schools great for the people that are attending. Eventually, what ends up happening is that starts to bolster the community that's attending. These people that are moving into the area are now starting to hear, hey, that's a pretty good school. Hey, Boyd's a brand new campus. Have you been down to Boyd in the city center area? That's all we can talk to you through. We can't tell you that one school has a bad perception. All we can tell you is this student population has been in decline in the area. The change has been happening from elementary school, and maybe in 5 years from now, it'll probably go all the way to middle school.
But you're showing schools that have increased in population over the last 10 years, like steadily, decreasing over the next 10. And I don't understand, if those are schools with a very positive perception, how can you say they're going to shrink that much?
Because there's no student population in the area.
But they can move there. I mean, we're not talking like an isolated incident. People are just stuck where they are. Like, people move into districts because they
do. They do move in the area, but they're not. The student population of the U.S. is in decline. Everybody understands that, right?
Yes.
Okay. Your population, and I would be sitting here kicking my heels up as administrator right now, because there are areas of the country where there's growth going on. There's houses being built and kids aren't showing up. Student generations are dropping. They were 0.7 average in some states. Now they're 0.4. Some places are 0.25. People aren't having as many kids. We had a leveling off this past year. CDC, I think, said it was a 0.3 increase or something like that. So I'm saying is that your population isn't going to expand by inward migration. People aren't going to be moving to Springfield, and if they are, young people, the people that are buying homes, over 40-something% of them are Gen Z, millennial, that aren't having as many kids. The average the average age of a new mom is over 27 years old. This is not the 1970s where it was down in the low 20s. So there's not some miracle that the kids are going to show back up. We just have to prepare for building schools and building up.
I guess that would make sense if you were showing a total decline across the whole district, but I just, exactly, so this is my question. How, some of the schools jumped off the page to me as being schools that people actively seek out, and those were also some of the schools that you showed the biggest decline in, and I'm wondering how you got there.
Well, look at their summaries within the report. You'll see that their historic numbers are driving that also. There's not as many students there as there were 4 or 5 years ago. They're starting to.
But these are schools that are most full now.
Yeah.
But you just said their numbers were declining.
Well, you said that. I said,
no, you're projecting declines is what
yes.
I'm saying. How are you arriving at that? When you're taking several of our schools that have a super high perception and people are moving into those areas to go to those schools specifically, and those are also schools that have just been doing nothing but growing and are maxed out right now, it's some of those schools that I see your 10-year projection just shows it falling off. And I'm wondering what's causing
at some point, there is no growth. You'll hit an apex.
But it doesn't have to be growth, right? So like a widower of 80 could move out and a family move in and replace them, and that happens a lot in some districts where or some zones where the perception is that's where you want to be, right?
You're not having regreening at the effect that it used to be. You had regreening in neighborhoods that were happening in 10 and 12 years. People are not selling their homes that are. Well, I'll use me as an example. My kids are born and raised, gone to college, not come back, and my wife and I are still living in a 4-bedroom, 3-bath house, what used to be a family neighborhood. This is just an anecdotal thing. I'm not selling that house. Guess what? Because I can't get another house. That the movement in that type of market it's not the same methodology as it was 20 years ago. You're not going to get the same mobility from young families. And the fact is, that same size young family that you expected to get from previous years, decades ago, it ain't happening. It's an anomaly now. And so when you look at a district school that you think is perceived to be a good school, I'm sure it is. But our report goes into the physical number of kids that are there and what we're expecting over the next 10 years.
But it doesn't go into the idea that new people could come in because they're seeking.
They could come in, but it's already we already see that the ebbs and flow within the current population. It's not there. You see some positive growth in some of the attendance areas, but it's not enough to offset the decline, the smaller class sizes that are coming in. You have smaller class sizes. That's why I pointed out that it was great that you have that pre-K program that's increased. California thinks that's the golden bullet too. All you're doing is introducing kids earlier and hopefully locking them in long term. That was Arizona's method 15 years ago.
Thank you. Do we have further questions from board members?
Are we thinking we're going to discuss more about these options After we ask some questions, or is that now?
My understanding is that we'd come back for a discussion during our December board meeting.
Well, I
They
thought
can
she
ask
wanted
questions
to
now, too.
maybe
I mean,
hear
yes.
what we were talking about.
You can ask any questions.
And then just a reminder to board members as well, if you haven't pulled the report, there's a 200-page report in addition to your presentation that you gave this
Yeah.
evening.
I'm sorry if you
So
didn't
we'll
get
have, it is dense, it is full of information. But of course, as Dr. Lathan indicated, we'll have the opportunity to continue to ask questions, but certainly if board members have questions this evening, yes.
Well,
It's broken down by resident population and by enrollment. So when you start, well, this is how many kids physically live there, you can also see how many are enrolled there and start, oh, I understand now what he's talking about, why there's differences in some of these things. Perception, we know what enrollment is, but we want to make sure that you understand the physical parameters of the neighborhoods.
To be honest with you, it had been 10 minutes, so I moved on, but I know that the answers are dense because there's so much information. So if you want to continue, go ahead, or
No, I don't have
move
any more
on to-
questions, but
Okay.
I'm just super intrigued and curious about what ultimately ends up being the recommendation from the district on the Pershing and Robertson issue. And there's probably a lot to comprehend here, but a lot more, like Scott alluded to, that still needs to be addressed that we don't have the information on. So I don't even know where to begin, but I really look forward to, I guess, a fully formed recommendation on where we go in those things, and including the bond funds and all of that as well. I mean, there's a lot outside of just this report that goes into those decisions. So I'm just kind of at a loss of words, like, to discuss it, because you said you wanted us to kind of hear what we might say and then form your recommendation based on that. And I'm kind of, I don't know where to go with it, other than I just really look forward to hearing your recommendation.
But we wanted to just kind of hear, because like I said, there are many steps in the process, but based on the information, I mean, the information validates what we discussed actually a year ago, and actually what many of you as board members and even community members started discussing years ago from the initial, I think it was 10 years ago from the initial report, if I'm not mistaken, and it validates that we do need to look at closing and consolidating, definitely the schools that we've talked about here, and then we have to look at some other things as it relates to, like I said, transportation. And so that is the next step in the process.
I really appreciate that we've gone through this process, and I think especially now as we're spending the bond funds as relates to these two schools in general, I mean, that's really, really important homework to do as we're making those big decisions.
Yeah,
Are there other things, I guess you kind of alluded to it, but other than the Pershing and the Robertson, are there other things that we're using this study for to look at to make sure that we're optimizing things across the district?
Well, just as we look at Robertson and Pershing, and really as you think about our recommendation and what we've discussed at cabinet and executive leadership team level, is we have two scenarios. Well, plan one for Robertson, a recommendation that we could also make for Pershing, but then there's some other things we would need to do to shift as we look at the alignment. And it was really neat to watch them in real time as we move the boundaries of the polygons, as you mentioned, because we would need to take other, and I don't want to, because we've tried to keep it contained to this, but if you go into the report, and I'm going to use an example of a school we just finished under the 2019 bond, is Sunshine Elementary. So if you go and look at the utilization and look, Sunshine is there.
Yeah.
And so we will need to, as a result of this report and the other recommendations, also look at how we shift students at Sunshine, because, I mean, there's nowhere else for them to go. Sunshine is maxed out, is at its capacity. So we do need to look at shifting students at those surrounding schools that surround or near Sunshine. So yes, there will be other recommendations and that we would bring beyond what happens to Robertson and Pershing.
And will transportation be using this to optimize?
Yes, they already have access to the system, and transportation would be utilized. So it's not just us making this decision in a bubble. Transportation is a part of this discussion.
But as a whole across the district, will transportation be able to use this data and look at what it shows to optimize even, I would think that would factor into the boundary discussion to optimize our ability to successfully transport kids, right?
Yes, yes. And that's what I said, we have access not only to this report, but also a system that looks at how do we shift students, shift those boundaries of transporting students, like you said, and how many students need to be at this particular location, how many students need to be at a different location. So all of that would factor in. So it's not just saying, okay, board members, we have a recommendation on Robertson, we have a recommendation on Pershing, but we would also say, this is what we're recommending also. So it would be a full package deal that we would need to list out some other changes that we need to make.
Okay, thank you.
Your question?
Yes, thank you.
I have a question. I think it's probably better for you, Dr. Lathan. On the 580 non-resident students down to 504 this year, I mean, I understand that we have staff members that bring their children in. I get that. Is that primarily what that number represents, staff that's bringing their children to R12?
From my understanding, that was, for the most part, it was staff, correct? Yes, Bruce, yes.
Okay, okay. Well, I've been born and raised here in Springfield, and I'm going to tell you that when I came over I always look at printed material, and here's the report, the whole thing. I almost fainted as it came off the printer, but I will tell you this, I found it very, very fascinating, and I will admit to having to read it to a certain degree in chunks, because there was so much to wrap my head around in terms of just information and then definitions, and then I go back, and I mean, it's very impressive. It really, really is. So you're to be commended for that. I wrote down that you mentioned possibly revisiting all of this in 3 years. I don't know where we'll be at that time, but that seems to make sense to me. And maybe that addresses some of the concerns that Board Member Byrne is bringing to it in case there have been some shifts in population that we haven't yet anticipated.
That's a common practice. There's some districts that they have to do this every 5 years and just check the box. But a lot of districts, I'll go back to Texas districts, we do it annually because there's a lot of them that are just trying to keep ahead of things, right? Putting out fires. But you all, I think you have a good basis to plan ahead for the next several years. It's just going back and doing a refresh. And it allows us to then look at, for instance, we'll look at a population area and say, okay, what's the shifts that have occurred there? It's nice when you work with a district maybe every other year, because I have clients up in Idaho I'll work with every couple of years, and then I'll compare the same sample size of houses and overlay the kids of each one of those years to see what the changes were. This is the eye-opening stuff, where people are going, oh, our generation rates are declining. I go, oh, significantly, because I can physically show them that. I can only tell them that's what's happening, but to actually be able to show them after several years of historical data, it's great. It's great getting into the weeds with the data.
When Board Member Byrne brings up the busing, I think that's significant, because for some of the scenarios mentioned, students would have to cross what we call a barrier street, and that's huge. It takes a neighborhood that can walk to school and forces them to cross a major thoroughfare, which requires the district to do some additional busing and to get children to and from. Sunshine is one, yeah. And that's where we place crossing guards and everywhere else, but we don't place crossing guards at barrier streets for a good reason. But anyway, we have a bus driver shortage, as the whole country does. So I think that's why some of that is being brought up. But I will just say thank you. I was pleased to get to and I didn't jump ahead. Sometimes in a novel, I'll go to look at the ending, so I didn't do that. But I was pleased when I read in the report that we have a stable population, because I don't know that I would have known that otherwise. And I was particularly intrigued by where children are, what zip code they're being born in. I thought that was very interesting. So thank you for the thoroughness of it. Thank you for your report. I also for your presentation this evening, I also appreciated your commentary, or your observation is a better way to say that, in terms of how the pre-K program is impacting us. in a positive way.
Yeah,
I mean, there are a
yeah.
lot of reasons why you want a good pre-K program, and student enrollment isn't the top one. It's providing a good education for children that are very young, but that's just an added benefit of it. So I had not thought of that previously, but you brought to my attention several things that I really appreciated, so thank you.
Yeah, thank you. It's important to point that out. It's a struggle throughout the nation, especially with keeping the enrollment up. And seeing that was it's refreshing. There's only certain parts of the country where I've seen the increases that have happened. And I think it's one because they're going to that nice new campus too. Helps sell the point.
I have a question. Can we take a break?
Sure. You mind to give us a minute to have a break?
I don't want to bolt out of here like I did the last meeting.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, yeah, we'll take a break. We'll take, what, 5-minute break? 7:40, yep, that sounds great. Thank you.
Yeah, it's on there. Can you hear me?
I can.
Okay. Do I need to go down here?
Maybe.
Okay. Pick it up. So we're building near Hickory Hills the most development and near Gray. So east and south is where there's more building, presumably more families or more people moving in there.
More people, yeah.
More people. But then, and I guess, so south is where Kickapoo High School is. And so Kickapoo is the high school that's at max capacity.
Correct.
I'm having a really hard time, and Kickapoo and Glendale both have wait lists,
That's
right? They're kids want to go there, they
Enrollment
can't.
wait list.
Because we have an open enrollment.
Yeah.
I didn't know if you were aware of that. So it's really hard for me to understand that, you show Sequiota, so that's going east, right? We're building east, is projected to, I'm looking at the forecasted change where you have the blue lines going this way, and I'm picking up the ones that are going way far, like lower.
Yeah.
And I'm just having a hard time accepting Sequiota and Kickapoo going under capacity by the double digits. Can you explain that to me? So
you want to look at this, when you go into the report, look at the summaries. Each one of the schools has a summary of enrollment and summary of resident population. You want to look at that population. The populations within that area were
there's
large.
aging. That's what you're saying, that the population's aging.
Bingo.
We have open enrollment.
Yeah, so you have two summaries to look at. You have a summary of resident population and a summary of enrollment. Now, the enrollment population, we have to address it by what are the factors? It's the same factors that go into the student population of anything else. So that population has some very large class sizes, and those class sizes aren't expected to continue. They're going to be aging out, matriculating through and being replaced by smaller grade configurations, smaller grade sizes, smaller cohorts from the other areas.
And you're assuming that all the new development that's going in south is still growing. There's a lot more land still.
Yeah.
That those, if they are families.
They'll offset the loss.
Right, but they'll be maybe younger families. As you move out of town, homes become a little less expensive because of real estate. So maybe in the 20-year forecast, there'll be an increase by the time kids are born and go to high school, but your projection is 3 and 10.
5 to 10.
5 to 10, sorry. So I'm able to accept that, except, the census showed that Springfield population is growing.
The physical
So the
population is
birth
growing.
right, so there's two things. Some of it is, you show us on a decline, decreasing birth, but some of it is we now have more education alternatives
Correct.
that people are taking advantage of.
Yep, it's in the report.
Right, but you've not put that in the forecast in terms of,
We did. It's your student population. We don't forecast.
so there's no forecast that if there's an improvement in the quality of education, it becomes more attractive, that we can attract more of those students.
That is an effect that is not a next year effect. That is a generational effect. That's a 10-year effect. It doesn't happen overnight.
Okay. In your projection, you show that center area
Yeah.
increasing. So we've
Some
got
parts.
Parkview. So Parkview, we're showing at capacity, you have it in 5 to 10 years, right?
In some parts, it's increasing.
Is that because of apartment building? How is that increasing?
There's the population in that area is increasing. Just the physical number of kids are increasing. It has a
So
positive.
you're thinking it's like a renter turnover, there'll be,
The mobility, the retention in that area is greater than the neighboring areas. If you look at the mobility report, you'll see a line for that attendance area. For the elementary attendance area, grades 1 through 12, it shows a number in there. I don't know it specifically because there's 57 different schools.
hold on one sec. Give me one sec.
Now, just keep in mind, if you hear the population increasing, that's fantastic. It's not the population you want to look at, it's the relationship, the ratio. We used to be, 40 years ago, the pyramid looked like this, with the 5 and 6 year old, 0 to 5 year olds as the widest base. You look at the pyramid now, we're a column. We become Italy, or we're going to become Italy. There are going to be neighborhoods that are going to be empty in some communities that we would have saw kids. Heck, I'll give you my own neighborhood. That's an example. There's no kids in our area. We have 100 homes, and I can tell you that there's 5 kids, school-age kids in that area that used to be 70 or so, 70 or 80. 2 buses. Now the bus drives down the street and actually pulls up because they want to make sure to get the kids to the school. They pull up in front of the house now. They don't even go down to the bus stop.
I have one more question.
Yeah.
And then one question for Dr. Lathan. So I just want to make sure that when you factored in pre-K isn't an indication of increased birth. It's just an indication of how many students are enrolled in PK.
Correct.
I got the sense that when you were speaking that you're saying that if we're able to attract the students in PK for preschool, for pre-kindergarten, we can lock them in.
Correct.
But I didn't know if you were aware that that's not a utilization. We are at capacity for pre-kindergarten. There are more kids who want to come. The only reason we've been able to expand that is we have been able to expand
Absolutely.
capacity by putting PK in select schools as we can find space, classroom size, personnel, and then building the early education centers. I mean, there's a whole lot out there.
Yeah.
So how did you factor that in?
So when we look at pre-K and kindergarten, the kids aren't in the population. So we're looking at birth numbers and looking at how many kids were born 4 years ago to see if we can see a change in that population.
So you have access to birth records? You've looked at that?
It's in the report.
Right.
It's
But,
remember she
but
talked
you're
about
saying
zip
if
code
you
area.
can get them at pre-K, you're more likely to have them attend school, like kindergarten through 12?
That's not even an assumption. That's a known fact. School districts.
Let me
are trying to
re-ask my
bolster
question.
that. Yeah.
Okay. I don't think you're understanding my question. How much of a factor is pre-K into your 5 and 10-year forecast? Because, and the reason I have to ask you that is because the number of students we have at pre-K is not a utilization, like I said. We are at capacity. So the more we create pre-K, the more students we get. So how much of a factor was that?
We don't know what you're going to create. We have to assume that you're at the utilization. If you increase utilization, then we go, oh, it's like the TK problem in California. They're creating utilization, increasing utilization. We have to adjust the factor for subsequent years to increase that future population. Right now, we can just assume you're using the current utilization. Now, Dr. Lathan calls me and says, hey, Lauren, guess what? You know that school that's underutilized? We're going to put a pre-K center in there. I go, good. How many classrooms? 5. Perfect. 100 more kids. because you have now more utilization. Now we have to factor that in. Another 100 more kids that are going to be in the population earlier.
I guess what I'm trying to understand is you're using all these factors, but the factors that really have an impact are things such as if you go and talk to the chamber or people's perception, that's a big factor. Pre-K capacity utilization, that's a big factor. So there's all these unknowns that are actually much more significant in terms of feeding into the equation. You're using other unknowns, such as, are John and Sally going to sell their home or not? Who's going to move in? How many kids are John and Sally's kids going to have, right? Those are also unknowns. But you're banking, you're putting your money on those factors, and I'm just trying to understand what you're not looking at. And I think I've gotten those answered.
We've been using the same methodology at Davis since the early 80s, late 70s. The state of California actually adopted this methodology back in the 70s, right after Bill Davis started publishing it. This methodology is used by most geographers that are using GIS and resident-based because we're trying to get ahead of the physical population.
I get that.
Yeah.
So is open enrollment at all a consideration in your study? I didn't see that.
Open enrollment is your population.
I'm still trying to understand how Kickapoo is going to be underutilized in 10 years. Can you explain that?
So in your population, it's projected to start declining. You have a larger population in the area right now. The subsequent grades that are behind it are not as large as the average size
I get
is
that.
now.
Glendale has a wait list.
Yeah.
People are willing to drive the extra mile it takes to get their kids, for whatever reason, that's public perception, to these schools. And that's not been factored in.
So
Correct?
it has been factored in. So the kids.
It has been factored in?
The students are enrolled in your schools, right? We geocode the kids of the world so we understand
No,
where they
but
are.
when you start high school, kids there's mobility when you
That's
go from
fine.
elementary to middle
Well,
and middle to high school.
That's fine, but they still are in your student population. We're looking at the ebbs and flows within the neighborhoods to understand what are the changes. Your enrollment policies can change in a couple of years. Where a person lives, it takes a little bit of time for them to move, but to change a policy is a 3-month period. Next thing you know, enrollment's different. It still doesn't change the fact that there's 250 kids living in that neighborhood.
Okay.
Yeah.
So my last question is,
You also looked at where students were moving to and from.
Correct.
When you're looking at the schools and seeing, okay, if you're in Field Elementary district line, but you're going elsewhere, it's that little chart thing,
That's
right?
it.
So
Yeah.
you did take into consideration
Correct.
people moving around.
Yeah, you can, that's where I made the point, center, the high school, Central.
Central.
I was, that's why I said, if, Travis knows this, if I looked at it as just a plain account and looked at numbers, I would go, oh, wow, Central's resident numbers are really low. Why is that still open? Well, you flip the page. Oh, look, they have a program on campus. That's why it's all mayhem. When you go over there, at the end of the day, it's being utilized. It's a central location within the district. But that policy can change, right? Maybe somebody comes from the state and says, you know what? We need to readjust your capacity for that campus. Or a school gets red tagged. Stuff happens. But knowing where the kids are, knowing those relationships and how many kids are attending from outside the boundary of that area, we can say, hey, by the way, you're open enrolled right now here. There's a problem. We're going to have to condense from 30 classrooms to 20. And because you're from outside the area, because they're open enrolled, we know where they are based off the matrix, we can then give them other choices.
my last question is, so this last time the study was done 10 years ago, approximately, I would really like to be able to see what their projection was for 10 years later to see where we are now. I assume it wasn't you all, because you would have probably had that information with you.
That's right. So 10 years
So I
ago,
think-
what were we coming out of? We were coming out of the housing, so we had people dealing with the transition when the housing crisis. We were just in recovery. So you're going to see a very optimistic number. And remember before, 10 years leading into that, everybody thought we're just blowing up. Everything's going to be, we're going to have 80,000 kids, we're going to have this and that, and that didn't happen.
You're right, it didn't pan out. So a lot of things we say are going to happen may not happen.
May not happen.
Exactly.
But the idea is that the report is a tool in the tool belt to allow you to physically look at an area. That's an area we need to focus in on when it comes to boundary scenarios and things like that.
We can get that.
We have, yes, I was just finding out we have electronic, I know we have a hard copy.
Or if they even did a 10-year projection, I don't know if
No,
they
it
did.
was projections, and so
Yeah.
please feel free to speak up, those staff members that were here, and I think there were some there were projections, and then I don't think we acted on some of them that are actually, I think you're gonna see some of the same similarities. But yes, we
It
do
would just
have a
be
hard copy of the report.
interesting to look at, yeah.
Be glad to share it.
Thank you.
Any further questions from board members? Okay, I had just a couple questions or comments. I know, obviously, you gave us some recommendations or options. Did you consider what it would look like if there was no change at all? And I'm assuming from you that that is not a recommendation of yours.
Yeah, I would. Again, I'll go back to the comment. If I was looking at this as an accountant, I would have already started identifying schools. And then I was told, okay, this school's a newer school, this school has a program. Okay, got it. I understand why that should be there. And then go from there. And then we had a confab and then started deciding, okay, this is the focus from the facility committee, the community stakeholders. And I said, okay, I understand that. Okay, we'll try to figure that out, right? It allows us to do what ifs without having to do the whole thing.
And you work with a number of districts, obviously.
Yes, ma'am.
Is it odd for a district our size to just do it every 10 years?
To do this type of thing,
Study?
you're the largest district in the state. You probably should be doing it every 5 years. There are certain states that require it every 5 years. It's the check. Remember I mentioned the check the box thing? That's someone will come in and enroll in the cohort method where they're just doing the tabular stuff and roll the enrollment numbers out and signs off and down the road motors. This is more facility level and then we're using GIS, and the GIS we can then hand off to the district who has GIS to do other things.
But for school districts who are voluntarily doing this,
Yeah.
based on your experience, probably every 5 years.
Your district probably should do it every 5 years. You have a master plan in place that you need to address it.
Sure.
There are districts that are similar, static, not as big, but they do it every 2 years. It's just all depending on what their budgets are and how they want to do things and how the administration is set up. Because there's some districts where I'll walk in and I'm the only person there that's been around for 20 years. And there's other districts that they hire us because I'm the one that knows where the bodies are buried. No one, because I've gone through 8 superintendents. I'm there talking about why things have changed. I show up and there's a name plaque. You all have a name plaque? I have a name plaque at some of the districts. Yeah, so, but they do it, some districts do it every year. You should probably be doing it more frequently, at least every 5 years, because it's important. You have a lot of capitalized
Board
investments.
Member Mohammed Khani had another
One
question.
more question. So how much did this study cost?
70.
Well, I mean, if we're going to talk about it every 5 years, it's
Yeah.
a great idea, but how much does it cost?
I don't know. I think it's like 70,000 or something like that.
Yeah, it's just under 80, 79,000 and change.
Yeah.
So to come back, not 10 years later, but let's say in 3 or 4 or 5 years, would it cost less or would it be about the same plus inflation?
Well,
Do you know what I mean? Is there like an update? Is there like an update?
There is an update. Travis and Cameron and I could tell you it was difficult getting stuff together. Now that we have it together.
Because you were new. We were new to you.
We were new.
But now that
understanding how the zones were split.
Right, but now that you know everything, let's say let's say we were not a new client. You'd just done this 4 years ago.
It typically is not more than what the original price line is. It's usually 80% less.
80% less?
80% of the initial price.
So 20% less?
Yeah.
Okay, I was like,
80%. I'm
wow,
sorry.
let's do it every year.
I'm getting punchy.
Okay, got it, thank you.
Wait, what's the rebate on that?
And on that note.
But we have a grasp of what's happening. The benefit is these questions and other things can now go into more depth. Like Mr. Burns saying, hey, what about this? We can then start focusing on that. Or, okay, Travis would talk about, hey, Mr. Burns was talking about this. Can we address this and this? How much time are we allotted to work on that part?
Well, thank you
Yeah.
for your time.
Yeah.
I know that the board, this is the first look that we've had since really January. I know you've been working with the district.
Well, the cool part about it is we were able to get a snapshot and we worked on it and then got the snapshot like 6 weeks ago. We're able to recreate actual stuff that's like within a couple of weeks old. So it's awesome.
Thank you very much for your time. We appreciate it.
Yeah.
As Dr. Lathan indicated, the board may have some additional questions over the upcoming weeks and months. So, sure. Turn.
I just
Scott.
look it up. Thank you. I just looked up the facility master plan that was done in 2016. It's got enrollment projections from 2016. So
Great.
it's a good place to start.
Okay.
Perfect. Thank you, everybody. Have a good night.
Thank you, you as well.
Thank you all. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, we're going to move on to item 11.01, change orders and agreements. Once again, Dr. Shaw.
Okay, good evening. The change order and agreement list is a standard list that you see each board meeting. The total of this particular list is $112,497. A couple things to note. You will see that there's some additions due to city codes around fire lane additions. Based on our initial submissions to the city, and even a second round of submissions, they then have come back and said, it's not enough, we want more, and so that's why that's increased. And when we add fire lanes, we add anywhere from 6 to 7 inches of either asphalt or concrete to accommodate that, so that's why those are as expensive as they are. That relocation and rock removal that you'll see, the relocation of the detention basin is a direct relation to the rock that was discovered. I was told we had a rock shelf about the size of a bus at Wilder that we got to deal with. And so that actually caused the detention basin to have to move, which caused an increase in cost as well. So just some brief explanation of what you're seeing in front of you. Any questions that I can try to answer for you?
Okay, the recommended action is that the board approve the change orders and agreements as presented. Do I have a motion? Motion from Board Member Thomas Tate, second from Board Member Muhammad Khani. Any discussion at this time? Seeing none, we will vote. Motion that the board approve the change orders and agreements as presented passes 7-0. Moving on to agenda item 11.02, your final report to us this evening, Dr. Shaw, update on the bond.
Yeah, I'm just trying to locate it on the desktop. Tammy, do you know where it is?
It's under executive content.
Oh, there you go. Why does everything look so different tonight?
I see what you see, because it says 2019, but it's really 2023.
Sorry, when I said final, I meant of the evening of tonight. He's been in front of us
But
for.
I'm noticing it says 2019 bond issue that was
Sure.
No, I think there are some things that are still going on that you might update us on.
What?
For 2019.
Where does it say 2019?
But you're only doing 2023.
Correct.
Okay.
Okay.
Is it just?
So that's just a
misprint-
typo.
Misprinted, okay. Okay, so as we go into this, as a reminder, here are the locations of our projects for Prop S. We haven't had a quarterly bond update for several months due to the reports that and the presentations that the architects have given on the schematic design as well as the design development. So a lot has taken place since then, so we'll be able to provide you with quite a bit of information. But again, love this image because it shows exactly where we are affecting our students. This is just a project sequencing plan. There have been a few dates adjusted, not a great deal, but due to a few things around construction and bidding, you will see that we're getting close to having the Cowden and Holland storm shelters bid out, and those should come to the board December, probably January timeline for your consideration for approval. But everything else seems to be moving on track, again, continuing to search for that right Pipkin property. The safety security project sequencing plan, again, a few things have adjusted. I'll be able to show you some details around the security film that we've been able to accomplish, but which has moved the door sensors and access control back. That'll kick off first part of the year, getting those designed and bid out as well so we can get those moving forward. Here's where we are in our project sequencing plan. Again, a few adjustments made based on a couple months here or there, but work is progressing. There's a lot going on around the district, and you'll be able to see that through the video and pictures. And here's just the graphic that you're used to seeing, and you can see where our main projects are throughout the district. This is a slide that you see every month within the Treasurer's report. This is the cover page of the bond financial report. What I want to point out is in the upper left, as you look at it, the bond proceeds that we sold is $190 million. You'll see that the district was able to earn nearly $12.3 million in premium from the sale of those bonds. We have $30 million still to be sold and issued, and to date, and these are usually about a month behind, we're about $325,000 in interest, which those will continue to increase. So representing currently about $232.6 million with a $220 million passage. So that's great news for the district that allows us to continue to do more work than we hoped to originally planned. So safety and security, the main emphasis at this point has been around the window film. We did 5 different packages so that we could get these bid out competitively. The first package was a high school. Those have been completed over the summer. The second package of the 9 or 8 middle schools plus the old Jarrett that's being used for Reed Middle School, scheduled to be completed at the end of December. Package 3, 20 of our elementary sites, projected to be finished by the end of this month, actually the end of this week, and they are the same contractor that is received the bid for package 4, so they'll immediately start into that 1st of December and finish up middle of January. And then the 5th package were primarily administrative sites, and that's 100% complete. So great work on that. Really pleased with how those bids came in. It was really difficult to get an accurate cost estimate, and so the estimate that we provided early on was $2.5 million, and that actually came in about $1.65 million, so well under what we estimated. That's going to allow us to continue to do more from the safety security piece as well. This is the safety security audit that's taking place. This is a quote by Strategos. I love the fact that they're about halfway through our facilities. They're very impressed with the current level of the security of our facilities, as well as the fact that they don't, at this point, have deemed anything critical on our the building facilities. So that's good news. It tells us we're doing a lot of good things and right things, and our buildings are in great shape when it comes to safety and security. The storm shelter gymnasiums, we have 4 under construction. We have Mann Elementary, and you can see the proximity of where it will be to the school. We have Wilder Elementary. Every site is different. Every site becomes a little more challenging. Rock, utilities, you name it, there's surprises. Oil tanks that we find, you just never know what you're going to locate. Watkins Elementary and then Pittman Elementary. So I believe it's Watkins started the precast panels going up over Thanksgiving, so you would drive by there and see a very different site than what you just saw in this image. Here are the budget updates for those particular projects. As a reminder, we budgeted a little bit less for Mann and Wilder because a lot of the design work had already been completed on those, but those were the two projects that came in well over what we had budgeted. So those two are over what we had budgeted, but you'll also notice Watkins and Pittman are currently trending under what we had budgeted. And so good news on one side, unfortunate on the other. Cowden and Holland, again, will bid out in another month or so, and we'll see where those come in. But it's the nature of what the sites present, as well as sometimes how they are designed. Reed Academy, just as a reminder, where the site sits and is located, with the properties that we were able to secure, that's now all been squared off. We have the space that we need. We've got the parking requirements that we need. We have the detention basin area that will accommodate on both ends. So that part is working out nicely for us. Again, just the renderings that you were shown at the DD phase from our architects, a couple different outside renderings. The lot is completely cleared at this point. If you go by there, it looks very different. But again, these are just images that you've previously seen on what we can expect the new Reed to look like. Update on budget, when Kelly and Judy and Navigate and myself, Dr. Lath and Chris Ford met to go over where we were on the 75% construction document phase. We're probably about 90% now, but these were the budget estimates that we've been provided with. You can see hard costs are very similar to what we estimated, which is a great trend. Soft cost, we've actually seen a reduction in our consultant fees compared to what we saw in the previous bond comparative to our construction costs. The soft cost budget were set at 20% of hard cost, but what we're seeing is that those consultant fees are not trending up with the rate of construction. Therefore, we're not utilizing all those costs, and so you can see a significant difference there. And then we always budget 6% inflation for our budgets, and we've seen inflation, but it's all also been a part of where the hard cost estimates are. Again, those costs and those estimates mean something right now, so we can hopefully budget accordingly. But at the end of the day, on bid day, that's the number that really matters. And so, but Navigate has been providing this to us. They will do their final 90% cost estimate, constructability review over the next month, and then we bid this project out. So excited to see where this one comes in. So with that, we have our first actual video from the 2023 bond. So I will get this going and step back out of the way. Okay, so next steps. Tonight, we saw the demographic boundary study. We'll continue to have discussion, recommendations around that work. The design and bid of the exterior door sensors and access control will start up shortly. Continuing to look for that and finalize that property purchase for Pipkin. And then summer of '24, a ways off, but there will be a recommendation for an architect to start the work on Pershing. So that concludes the quarterly update. Questions or comments?
Any questions or comments from board members? Yeah.
This is great. Great presentation.
Thank you.
Yeah. And I have to ask, how's the purchase of property? New Pipkin School going?
It's going great, Scott.
All right, thank you. All right. Okay. Excellent.
Got to be optimistic.
All right. Oh, good, thank you for that optimism. All right.
Any other questions or comments from board members?
I have a question.
Yeah.
So this go around, we have an owner's rep navigate. Would you say that they have met expectation in terms of cost savings? Is it what we thought it would be?
They have met all of the expectations that we have asked of them. Yeah, they gave us a scope of work. They've done everything that we have asked. They've been able to guide and direct in different situations with architects. They've been able to look at ways where we could save money and presented information to the architects. They've been another layer that we haven't had.
So when it's all said and done, when Pershing and Pipkin and all that gets completed, would you say that they are well on their way to not only paying for themselves, the cost of hiring them, but saved us?
That's hard to quantify
funds.
right now.
Okay.
To me, they're in the phase where it's the most valuable phase, in my opinion, and that's the constructability phase, which we talked about that a little bit in our meeting, is how do you quantify that? Because what they will do in this particular phase that we've never had done before, which is what I'm most excited about, is they'll be able to they'll have a completely independent group of people on their team that will look at all the documents, they'll look at the drawings, and they'll do this constructability review that they'll compare. Where we see a lot of our change orders is when you have something in the drawings, it's not in the documents, or vice versa, and then it doesn't get bid, and then they come to us with a change order that says it wasn't in the document, so I didn't bid it. And so then you pay a premium on those change orders, because every change order, the general contractor gets 10% overhead and profit. They don't get overhead, they don't get 10% in the actual bid, because they would never get the bid, because that would be way too much. But because of the additional work that's needed to put together change orders and to deal with that with the subcontractor, so that always costs the owner more money. And so the more we can reduce change orders on the front end, the more value that brings to the district.
So subjectively, dollars aside, you
Yeah, and
personally.
I think they're going to keep track of that as they find things.
As they find things,
And then be
okay.
able to report back to us.
But just you subjectively, having gone through this process once before with building of new schools during this early phase, are you personally finding it subjectively, as it sounds like you are, of added value?
Yeah, there's been an added value.
Okay.
It's hard for me to say, is a value of what we're paying for their services? Have we been able to see that specifically? They can quantify the specific dollar amounts that they're able to find to value engineer certain things. Like, for example, at Pipkin, they said you can save this much money by taking the clear story windows out of the top of these areas. So that might have been $150,000 savings. Does that mean that they just gave us $150,000 of their worth? I wouldn't say that, because an architect could also get pricing on that and give us that same information. But where I found their value is they understand construction. They're not the architect. They don't tell the architect what to do, but they understand construction, so they can look at certain things and say, this is going to save you money if you do this, or you really don't need this, but you can go this route. Or this particular material would be less expensive if you go this route, but the availability of it may not be there. So that's value that they've been able to give. But it is challenging to quantify everything that they've done. But they have been a great partner to work with.
They're a great partner
They've
to
been a
work
great
with.
partner to work with, yes.
Any further questions or comments? Okay, thank you for that update. Move on to the superintendent's update for the board.
Thank you. We have some important deadlines approaching for parents. The application window for choice programs closes Friday, December 1st. So students who are interested in attending one of our magnet schools, I encourage our families to apply. Friday, December 8th is the deadline to request a transitional transfer for current 5th graders and 8th grade students who want to attend a different middle or high school next year. We've had a number of opportunities to engage with our parents, communities, and staff recently. November 16th was SPS University at Glendale High School. I'd like to thank the Board of Education members for their participation in a breakout session during that event. This week, I started my first round of lunch and learn meetings with staff, and I also will be meeting virtually with staff members through Gather with Grenita, which is in its 3rd year in December. These are great opportunities, of course, for me to have an opportunity to engage with our staff. Tickets are currently on sale at the Great Southern Bank Arena box office for the 39th Annual Bass Pro Tournament of Champions. It will be held January 11th through the 13th, 2024. Central and Glendale High Schools will represent SPS in this tournament, which features outstanding teams from across the country. That concludes my update.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Lathan. Moves us to agenda item 13.01, board comments. Are there any comments from my board members this evening? My fellow
I'd
board
like to
members?
make the comment if I could, please. Since we got a break, I appreciate that earlier. It appears last week that I had a necessity to go to the facilities and utilize it, that I darted out of here without asking for a break. Sometimes it's a necessity, and people took that as maybe it was disrespectful to Dr. Lathan because her comments were coming up. It's farthest from the truth. I have the greatest respect for Dr. Lathan and the staff that do such a great job for us here. So you're mistaken if you thought otherwise, because I would never do that to you. I just want to make sure that was clear.
Right. Thank you for that comment. Any further comments?
I have a couple of things. I did have the opportunity to be a part of the breakout session at SPS University with President Kincaid and board member Byrne. And while I will say that the session that we were in was not heavily attended, I really didn't know what to expect. But we took, it was a 30-minute session. We took a little bit of time at the beginning to talk about the difference between school board member role and superintendent role, because I do think sometimes there's confusion as to exactly what is the job of the superintendent and then board members individually and collectively. So I was pleased to be able to do that. But more importantly, most of the time was spent in people asking us questions that I thought were well thought through, they were honest, and while the attendance wasn't maybe what I would hope, and even some of the people in the audience said, I wish more people were here, I will say, and Board Member Byrne and President Kincaid can comment on their own, I do think, though, that the people that were in the room that night really did appreciate the opportunity to get up close and to ask us some questions. So I left that evening feeling good about it, and again, proud and considered a privilege to serve in this capacity to the community. I wanted to make a comment about school safety. And sometimes it can be lost on people especially when we look at high schools. Our high schools are the size, every one of them, of a small town in Missouri. So we are bringing a small town in Missouri together under one roof, and whatever issues or concerns or problems might be out there in small town America, we're bringing those kids together under one roof and trying to make things work. It is a balancing act, and it is keeping our schools and our student, and this is a national comment, is no easy thing. But we are blessed here in Springfield to have the expertise of Chief Farrell and his officers that go above and beyond every day and connect with kids in a positive way and do the job however they need to do it. So a well-trained school police force, the value of that cannot be underestimated, and we as a district are the beneficiaries of that. I will also say that the staffs out in these schools, whether it's the cooks, that sometimes are the most popular people in the building because they give kids food, or the custodians that they see in the halls and respect and like, our staff, teachers, counselors, social workers, administrators, I will always maintain that one of the best safe school strategies is a caring staff that knows how to connect professionally with kids and sees the value of student voice and letting kids have a say in a reasonable way and let them know that their voices are very important. I think we have a good balance of that going right now in our high schools, and I'm grateful for that every single day. I had the opportunity today to attend the Lunch and Learn, and it was over at the Launch building. I'd not been in that facility before, so Dr. Lemon walked me around just briefly. And I will tell you, I was very impressed. I got to walk into a launch session with, it looked like about 15 kindergarten students. I was absolutely impressed as someone that taught kindergarten for 1 year and knew it wasn't the best fit for me. I was very, very impressed with the amount of communication that was going on, and from what I could see, the learning that was happening and the enthusiasm of the kids and the enthusiasm of the instructor. And I really had that feeling as I walked throughout the building. But what took me there today was the Lunch and Learn session with Katie Kinzinger and Amy Patton. And they were talking about college and career readiness. And again, it was one of those events where, and I've said this before, but it was just, it was true again today. I was inspired by their presentation. It was comprehensive. It was informative. People in the room, it was well attended. People in the room agreed that Springfield Public Schools is a great bargain for our families. And I challenged them to go out and tell the story of Springfield Public Schools because good things are happening here. They are, and we're lucky to be in this community. And when the gentleman this evening talked about schools need to go tell their story, that's absolutely correct. Our high schools are competing for students. That's the way it is. And it's been that way for a long time now. So we have to go out, we have to tell our story of the district, we have to tell our story of individual schools, and then give parents and families a compelling reason to stay here in R12 because of the amazing educational opportunities that we offer. So I will just say that it was another inspirational day for me to learn more about Springfield Public Schools, even though I've been around for a long time. So thank you.
Thank you for your thoughtful comments.
Yeah.
Any further comments? Okay. Seeing none, it moves us to upcoming meetings. Our next board meeting will be December 19th. That will be a combined meeting. So we'll see you on September 19th. And this time, I will entertain a motion that the board adjourn the meeting. Okay, thank you. Board Member Christ, thank you for the motion. Do I have a second?
I'll second it.
Thank you, Board Member Muhammad Khani. I'm going to take a vote at this time.
I'll vote aye. I don't know what's up with my
I'm going to go out on a limb here and say that the motion, yes, to adjourn the meeting passes 7-0.